and cooking because it's like food is good and it just keep me busy and I want to own a food truck too. Any more questions?
Yes, we do have we have a couple more. Thank you for being here. I represent St. Louis Park and I guess I'm sorry that St. Louis Park didn't work out for you, and I'm super excited that Walt did. So I'm really glad that you're here. And I want to know what kind of food truck.
Like soul food. Yeah.
What's your favorite thing to cook?
I like jerk chicken.
I will come to. Well, we will hire you. So just take a business card. All right, I think we had another one over here.
Yeah, I was just wondering, how long have you been with District 287?
So since last year.
Nice,
Yeah.
thanks.
I came there with 8 credits, now I only got 3.5.
Thank you so much.
Maybe there's we have a couple more, and Principal Poppy Finley has raised her hand and said she's in the car. We're going to let her go first, and then we'll go to Francesca.
Thank you. Alicia, I think something that's really important you could share with the board is that you recently moved and the challenges you face and the dedication you have to graduating by what you're doing every day to get to school.
Oh yeah, I take a $18 Uber to school every day there and back, or sometimes to work because I live like out of the district. Yeah.
Well, you moved to Robbinsdale, which is in the district, but not served through transportation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That is dedication and something that I would hope that we can figure out how to fix someday so that students don't have to be doing that to get to school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Francesca.
Alicia, wow, that's a huge amount of money to have to spend. I'm so excited to hear you talk about your interest in culinary school. And when you then followed it up and you said your thoughts on having a food truck, I got even more excited because it let me know that you've actually really started that process of thinking forward, thinking ahead, and that's thrilling. Do you know where you might want to go to restaurant school?
It was like a trade school that my teacher was telling me about, but it be filling up so fast that you have to get it. And I want to do the summertime so I can work in like the morning, then go to the afternoon to do it.
That's a good plan. I like that. Well, I think that you have a lot of the passion I can tell when you started mentioning what you want to cook. And I love soul food and I also like Caribbean food and jerk chicken. I think you have a lot of success. Do you feel that the teachers you are dealing with right now, do you feel that they're going to, or in the school you're in, do you feel like they will be able to help you make that connection, make that next step to get into culinary school? Or is there something else that you need to help you be able to navigate to there?
No, I think they can help me because they help a lot of students. Like it's this one student, she wanted to do nursing and she took the nursing class in the morning and they still came to my school. And I think she finished it, right?
Talking about going ahead of Kentucky.
Yeah, another month.
Yeah.
And good answer with your teacher behind you. Can't do it.
You got extra credit.
Him and Shibley.
What would you name your food truck? Do you have any?
No.
Well, when you do, please let us know.
Yes. Alicia, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you, Mom, for all of your support along the way. And thank you to Team Walt for coming in, for supporting Alicia, and just for all that you're doing to help her reach her dreams. And let us know when this food truck is a thing, and we will be there with bells on. Thank you so much. Okay, I am going to turn it over to Superintendent Dowd for the superintendent report and welcoming one of our newest members of the team.
Yes, sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'd like Kiara Zachary to come to the podium. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome our new Director of Equity and Inclusion. And some of you were able to meet with her as we went on, get on the bus to North. But I am just going to ask Kiara to just share a little bit about herself, her past experience, and her short time here in 287.
Sure. Hello, school board members. Thank you, Superintendent Dowd, for your very warm welcome and introduction. My name is Kiara Zachary. I am really happy to be the new Director of Equity and Inclusion for District 287. Before coming to the district, I think 3 weeks ago, I was the Equity Inclusion Manager for the city of Golden Valley. That was an inaugural position, so it was a lot of fun creating new responsive systems in local government. Before that, I worked in Robbinsdale area schools in a number of different capacities, everything from teaching 5th grade to being a school climate and culture specialist. And there I really was able to think about how schools in particular can create systems change to create more equitable outcomes for students. Also at the Robbinsdale area schools, I was a participant of their Grow Your Own program. So I was licensed, but I went back to finish my master's and get my elementary education license. And I had to concentrate in equity-based pedagogy, which was a really wonderful opportunity at the University of Minnesota. So this is my jam. And I'm really glad to be back in education and where my heart feels the most full. In the last 3 weeks, I've really just been learning and making connections, really getting to see all of the, what it means, all of those innovative and specialized services. What does that mean? I've been able to go to all of the 4 sites, start visiting our care and treatment sites. I've sat in on a number of race equity team meetings, and really just trying to get a feel for all of the things that the district does and get to know my new colleagues so we can do really wonderful work together in the future.
Thank you.
I feel like I should ask for questions. I
should
noticed
ask
the
same thing
pattern.
I asked Alicia, would you like questions? Are you comfortable with questions?
I am comfortable with
Okay, good.
questions.
Go ahead, Michael.
Lovely to see you. I'm curious, it's only been 3 weeks and I don't want to put you on the spot, but like anything that has surprised you so far that is unexpected in your 3 weeks of learning about 287?
The very broad range of services that are provided. So while I was in Robbinsdale, I worked in an elementary school that had federal setting 3 EBD and DCD programs. And so my view of 287 was those transition conversations for our students. And I thought that was pretty much it. Coming here and seeing really the array of services, I've really been, I don't want to say like most impressed, but I have sat in on several classes in our care and treatment facilities and have really vibed with some of the students and in awe of the community that our care and treatment staff have been able to create, knowing that they experience really high turnover in some of their classes, right? So I think that was the most surprising, or the thing that most amazed me is that the type of learning that can go on in all of our spaces, and all of the different classrooms and services that we provide. So.
Thank you.
Ms. Zachary, when I got the email that you have been promoted to Director of Equity and Inclusion, I had circled the email, to the rest of the Robbinsdale staff, in that you're from our district, and heard a lot of positive things about you and what you've done in Robbinsdale. So my Robbinsdale hat, when I keep you there, I'd like to welcome you, and glad you're here, and that you came to the Grow Your Own that we have in Robbinsdale. So welcome aboard, and I hope you can be a great asset to the staff. I know you will be, and looking forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Your professional experience and the education experience that you've had is very impressive. And I wanted to ask you if you could say more about, you said you studied equity of pedagogy or pedagogy of equity?
Equity-based pedagogy, yes.
Equity-based pedagogy. Can you share a little bit more about that? Because I feel like that sounds to me like a really critical thing that
Mhm.
we need to bring forward in public education. I'd like to hear a little bit more about it before I.
Absolutely. Well, the core component of all of the equity-based pedagogy classes was how do you identify and disrupt systems of oppression for various social identities, specifically within the education setting. So we really took an opportunity every semester to learn the impacts of specific systems on groups of students. So students with disabilities, students that come from certain cultural backgrounds, students that are a part of the LGBTQ plus community. So really doing a lot of socio-political context building, as Loretta Hammond would say, right? So really just learning what it means to be and have a varied, to have different identities and how systems can be harmful. And then how do we disrupt and mitigate that, right? So what does it mean to be responsive? What does it mean to listen really deeply and intentionally? What does it mean to build authentic and genuine relationships? So it was really intense course, but it was a number of courses, right? But I think it really allowed for self-reflection about your own educational experience. I thought about my educational experience a lot differently than I had previously, and it provided me with language to identify some of the phenomenons I was experiencing, but maybe hadn't put language to. Yeah.
Or, does this include, you know the book, Follow Career Pedagogy of the Oppressed?
Yes.
Okay, so that was a very transformational book when I was going.
Yeah,
into
absolutely.
education.
Yeah.
And this is here at the University of Minnesota?
Yes, it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I had two professors and they were extremely inspirational. Noah Nuhu Sims, and Rebecca Grant. They were wonderful.
I'm so excited to hear here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nuhu worked, I think he's still there. He was an equity coach in 279 in ICU.
Thank you so much, Kiara. We are so excited to have you with us and to work with you much, much more in the new year. Welcome in week 3.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.
All right, we are going to move to our instructional report, which this evening contains a data dashboard report. So Ben, come on up. We are really excited to get an update on this and how information is going to be shared with member districts.
All right, good evening, Madam Chair Bracke, members of the board, Superintendent Dowd. I appreciate a few minutes with you this evening. There's two things that I'd like to accomplish today, my learning intentions, if you will. One is I want to just give a brief overview of the current status of our data dashboard. It's a work in progress. We've spent almost 2 years now working on our data dashboard. I'll be fairly brief in that overview of the dashboard because I really want to get to learning intention number 2. And that is about how we are going to improve the way in which we are sharing data with each of our member districts. And so my hope is that by the end of this presentation, you'll have a good understanding of what exactly that will look like, the way we have conceived it as of today. I mentioned the first part of this again, that we've been working on our data dashboard for almost 2 years. But it's much more than that to become a better data-driven organization. Right? There's lots of other parts about how do we get from where we were to where we're going. We need to make sure that our data input at our sites, the way that we're collecting data, is consistent, that we have a common definition and way in which we said these are the things that we record and that we report. So our data input is strong across our sites. We also need to make sure that our leaders, our principals, assistant principals, and other leaders are effective leaders of the use of data. that they understand they're data literate, they understand data protocols, and how to lead their teams through looking at data so they can respond to it and make sure that we have interventions in place for our students. We've also been working for the last 2 years about making sure that each of our sites have a data team. Sometimes it's called an RSS team, a responsive systems of support team, but some version of a data team at all of our sites. All 4 of these different buckets all work together as the drivers for us to become more data-driven than what we were, again, before. I'm going to jump over to a live view of our data dashboard in just a second. There's 3 things that I'll say just before I get there. One is an important development that we've put in place over the last year or so is what we call row-level security. It's essentially giving each person who has access to the dashboard only access to the data that's important to them, that they need to know. So for example, a principal only has access to their building, a district leader would have access to the entire district, but a teacher would only have access to their students in their class. We've really spent a lot of time on our behavior report. I'll show you that in just a second, or at least parts of that. And the last bullet point there, the member district disaggregation. This is new within just the last couple of months. It's really what's allowed us to take this next step that we're excited about, and that is giving data back to our member district leaders like we did this morning with our superintendents. This is a live look at our data dashboard, the way that it's currently designed. Again, it's always a work in progress. We've spent a lot of time, as I've shared at board meetings in the past, on the development of this dashboard, and we'll continue to do that as we go forward. This landing page was originally designed around our strategic priorities, and so you see some of that captured here. You're looking at enrollment, students who've reintegrated back into their home district or in the process of that. On the left-hand side is attendance, and on the right-hand side, those 18.75 and 8%, those are academic screeners that I'll share more about in just a few minutes. On the bottom, you'll see again up to date information about critical incidents and restrictive procedures. And this is really important data for us because as you know, we're about 60 or 65 days or so into the school year. And the number of critical incidents that you see is 685. That means that on average, we're responding to 10 critical incidents per day or so. Restrictive procedures are there at 515. Also means that we're responding to quite a number of restrictive procedures on any given day. The recent multiple RP students, that bottom right part of what you're looking at, that too has really been important work on the data dashboard because we have a requirement, a law that says that if there are 2 restrictive procedures, a physical hold with a student within 30 days, we have an obligation to hold an IEP meeting. And so having easy access to that data was really important for us. My intention is not to go through the entire data dashboard. I'm just going to highlight a couple of other things that will move us forward to the next part of the presentation. And maybe I'll take questions all at once at the end. The left-hand side of the data dashboard, all of these drop down. And so we can dig further into all of the details of each report. All of our data, of course, is disaggregated by race. And in most cases, we can drill down and up through the data. So we can look at the whole district data, for the example, with attendance, and we can go all the way down to the individual students. So we could go district to building to classroom to student, and then we can see an individual student attendance. We can do that same kind of drill down process through all of those behavior reports of restrictive procedures and critical incidents and things like that. And so that we can also see the big picture and that we can also drop down and make sure that we're responding to the needs of our students.
Ask a question.
Yeah.
So as we were at North the other day for getting on the bus, we talked about the ALC attendance challenges with transportation, just like we heard from our students. I'm assuming that in this, you would be able to, if you want to look specifically at transportation issues or attendance issues related to certain segments of the population, this would allow you to get down to that level of data?
Yeah, for the most part, and this is actually it's a timely question. I hear you asking about the reasons for absences. And I won't go into too much detail here, but right where I put my cursor, right there, we just added that by reason part of attendance. And so that we could look for the reasons why students are absent, and we can make some good decisions about that. Typically, the way that we're doing it with our data teams, with our principals and assistant principals and others leading those teams, is that we're looking at the students who have high degrees of absences and truancy, and then we're organizing that to make sure that we have interventions in place for each of our students, maybe from the bottom up. If we wanted to get into more detail, we could certainly just go into any number of one of these reports and do the same kind of work of drilling down and drilling up. It's one of the most important features about the way that we have this organized. One, again, that we've emphasized race throughout this, but then two, that we can get down to the student level and make good data-driven decisions, not just organizationally, but at the student level. I know that's a very brief overview. I kind of just wanted to give you a quick update on the way that the dashboard looked, but I'd like to move over to the report, but I'll see if maybe I will see if there's any questions about the dashboard itself before I move on. Yeah.
How often at the district level are you using this to do that from the top all the way down, look through in the different areas to see where there may be, to use that data to help you to identify if there's any trends or any places where the district could shift or do things differently?
I'd quite honestly say that we're getting better, that we have certainly some places that we do that work. Our executive leadership team just looked at the data within the last couple of weeks. We've led a professional learning session for our school administrators looking at the data as well. And we have a couple other places where it happens pretty regularly as well. But I would say that where we want to move to is more of a consistent pattern of looking at that data, and so that we can do so on a regular basis. And we'll use it a lot going forward in the strategic plan that Marcy and Elizabeth are leading. But I would say that we're still working to be more consistent.
Well, there's a lot already going on a regular basis, so adding in anything new takes time before it becomes regular, and also everybody needs professional development and training on how to use it depending on what level they're at, for sure.
Ben, did you say you shared this with district superintendents?
So I just did kind of a same kind of walkthrough of what I just did here earlier this morning, and the reports themselves that I'm going to show you next. Each of the superintendents have a copy of their report as of this morning or today.
Great transition. Oh, you have one more
One
question?
more,
Go ahead.
one more. Given this new, or you're expanding and you're growing this type of capability, are there particular buckets that you think are the most important for your team, both at the building administrative level and at the executive level of the district, that you didn't have before, that this is now going to help you in your planning process or your execution?
Yeah, I'm gonna actually reflect back on something that we heard from a few superintendents this morning, and that is that we want you to continue to emphasize the academic part of your work. We've really appreciated. I'm paraphrasing what I heard.
Mhm.
We've really appreciated how much you've painted the picture of the challenges in your district and the safety issues, the critical incidents, and the restrictive procedures. But we really also want you to focus on academics. That we want you to focus on the academic screeners that you have and credit attainment. So I think I would answer it that way, that where we are now, we have a really great way of looking at the behavior. We have more work to do in the mental health part of this. But I think our next steps are really going to be focusing on that question from the superintendents and making sure that we're equally emphasizing that part of the work that we need to do in our district.
That's actually a really interesting thing to point out. I think it kind of shows some of the difference in perspective of member districts versus 287, and part of the reason why students do come here and why this district does for those students better meet their needs. There is a more of a focus on what they need that focus to be on, as well as the academics, but primarily recognizing that those other needs, if they're not met, the academics aren't going to happen.
right, I'm going to jump over to the next part of the presentation. And I'm gonna share a few things as I get going here. One is that one of the reasons that we're really excited to talk about this report and walk through this with you is that we feel that we are in large parts, perhaps finally, but we're delivering on a 7-year-old commitment to improve the way that we communicate with member districts and to become a more data-driven organization. If we look back at the 2015-2020 strategic plan, then what you would see is that 2 of the 4 buckets of that plan were about communication and data. Now here we are in almost 2023, and we're really excited to be able to share our first step to be able to give data back to superintendents and special education directors and others, so they have data about how their students are doing in our district. We're calling this a student report. The version I'm going to show you tonight just happens to be ASIO. It just was the first one that we got done, and it's our largest member.
I'll pay you later.
There's a couple details that I'm going to try to keep it high level, but might be helpful for you to know. And it's all kind of in the fine print of the details that, again, I'll try to stay out of, but again, maybe just a few points. One is that sometimes we're talking about a couple different things when you look at the data. There might be, just like that enrollment report that I shared a couple months ago. In some cases, we're talking about some groups of students, but maybe not all students. And in some cases, we're talking about students that are residents of the member district, like for our ALC students. And in other cases, when we're talking about our special education setting 4, we're talking about serving district. So the member district that's serving those students, and those can be different numbers. Usually not like really different, but they certainly can be different. So if you're adding them up and you're saying, hey, I don't quite see how this adds up, it could be that. It could also be, some cases we're talking about current data that was pulled just within the last couple of days. But in the case of attendance, we're talking about cumulative data. We're displaying any data that if a student attended at any point over the course of the year, we're capturing that in attendance. And so again, just another maybe caveat or asterisk so that you understand that when you see some differences, if you do happen to see them as I go or in your packet, that's probably what's going on, and it's for the most part captured in that fine print of the report. The table of contents is here just as a guide, and I'll skip the introduction. Each of the member district reports, this first page all looks the same. This is District 287 data. And so enrollment data, similar to what we shared previously, is in that first part of the report. Northern Star online data and demographic data. So in each of the reports, this page is exactly the same. That disaggregation by member district that I mentioned earlier is really what's allowed us to create these reports. And so from this point forward in each of the reports, now we're talking about a specific district. Again, in this case, we're talking about ASIO students. And this is the number of ASIO students that are enrolled in our ALCs. 21 students at 3 different schools. And then the demographics of those 21 students to follow. Here we're looking at setting 4 special education. Again, enrollment and demographic data. There are 115 students from ASIO that are enrolled in our district at the sites that you see in your packet and online. And the demographics of those 115 ASIO students. And here we're talking about served by ASIO. We have in this part, and maybe I'll go back up and just say a part that I missed. There's 3 different parts of the report. One is what we've just called broad criteria. It's enrollment, demographics, attendance, and reintegration. The other 2 parts are academic criteria and mental health and behavior are coming up after that. We're in that broad criteria part of the report. So the attendance for those 21 students and the different bars graphs there, those are the different sites that those 21 students are attending. And the attendance for the 97, let's say it's because the attendance report's a little bit different. In this one case, we're talking about residents of Osseo for special education. In all other instances, we're talking about served by Osseo for special education. Keep going. I understand it's fairly quick, but jump in if you have questions and I'll take them at the end as well. Reintegration is something that we're working on. These are students who are returning to their home district. You're only looking at students who are currently reintegrating. Students who have already reintegrated are not captured in the report at this time. There are students who have fully reintegrated, but it's not captured in the report this time. We will have that by the time we get to the next report, which will be at the end of the school year. I'll move into the academic part of the report. The numbers that, especially if you're looking at it on the screen, that you can see the best and that are the most important, maybe the 1.67, that's the number of credits attempted. It's pretty close to where probably students are in your districts for number of credits attempted. What maybe we're still working on is the next number down, which is 0.75. That's the average credits attained per student. Now you're talking about Q1 only here. So about 2 credits or so is something that we could be looking for in Q1. We're pretty close to that. Where we have some work to do is on the credit attainment part of it. And probably we could connect back that attendance that I was looking at to credit attainment. I'm going to skip over setting for credit attainment. For now, it is there though. You can see that it's a little different story of 1.74 attempted and 1.55 earned. There's some details in that I'll set aside for now, but setting for credit attainment is here as well. Here you're looking at academic screener data. We have combined 2 different assessments here. So this is the MAP test, and this is the A reading and A math. That's FastBridge. So there's 2 different assessments that we're looking at here. They've been smushed into these graphs. It's important maybe to note that not all students will take either one of those assessments. We're striving for everyone that it's appropriate for to take those assessments, but it's not appropriate for all students. So we're working on making sure that we have an academic screener for all of our students as we go forward. It's also important to note that here we're just looking at screener data, academic universal screeners from the fall. Our goal is to emphasize the growth of our students and looking for at least 1 year's worth of growth for each of our students. That's what we'll see in the end of the year report is the growth data as well. Students score from the fall to the spring, and are they making a year's worth of growth, and so that we can work on why or why not.
Would you say that that's the area that the superintendents might have been inferring in terms of showing academic progress, that they're seeing that that's the area of the report that they would want to focus on or would expect to focus on?
I would say that and credit attainment.
Yeah.
The last part of the report is the mental health and behavior part of the report. You can see that we've had no, in the case of, again, we're just talking about Osseo students here. ALCs, there were no critical incidents, but in our federal setting 4, students that we had 153 critical incidents just from Osseo with 46 different students involved. What that tells me is that there were probably a few students who make up a fairly large number of those critical incidents. Still something that's very important, but just with context around those numbers. The definition of a critical incident is listed there as well. I believe I've mentioned those previously. Restrictive procedures, all restrictive procedures are a critical incident, but not the other way around. Not all critical incidents are restrictive procedures. Similar story, 115 for Osseo students and 34 students. Shaded out parts of the last part of the report, and that is suspensions. It's just 1 student for 1 day. And so I didn't want it to be too identifiable here. So I'm just showing you the 1 suspension that we've had for Osseo students this year. That is the report. Our plan, again, is to bring this report to superintendents and special education directors 2 times per year. We did so with superintendents this morning. We'll do so with our CDAC members tomorrow. And then we will run a similar report at the end of the school year. So with that, I will open it to any questions.
Yeah, I first want to see Superintendent Dowd. Is there anything that you would like to add before we open it up for board
Thank you.
members?
First of all, I want to thank Ben and the team for getting to this point of being able to share data to really drill down and say, how are we doing? And so I think this is a great tool. When we shared it with the superintendents today, this is exactly what they've been asking for. And so again, this is our first report. We are with the superintendents and with the special education directors. This is our time where we're getting feedback from them. Does this match what they need? How could we work together? So for example, if a district is providing transportation to the ALC and we have an attendance issue, how can we come together with that student level data at the leadership level to look at proactive plans of support? So I think it was well received, and we'll continue to refine it and make sure that our data is clear and clean. Thank you. The only thing else I'd like to say, some of the data that you saw, it's alarming. And we are right there with you. We want to be transparent where we are. So we're considering this our baseline data. This is data that hasn't been consistently collected in history here. And so this is our baseline, and we will develop our strategic plan, our department goals, our district goals around what the data is telling us that is needed for our students and staff. Thank you.
I know, Michelle, you've had a question, so you get to go first.
For me, sorry, a point of reference. I keep hearing backpack in my ear. Is this kind of what they had in mind back when they created backpack that a student would carry around, depending on where their placements were?
The digital back.
Yeah.
Like here, was it something we talked about here in 287?
Predated me.
So to answer your question, Michelle, no, this is a report for district level. It's going to summarize the district level report. It's not the data for a student that could travel with the student when they came from school.
Okay. Thank you, May. Anne, go ahead.
This strikes me as a great opportunity to educate our boards, our member district boards. Is that something that you would think about doing, sharing with board members in our member districts, and how?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. Actually, we had this conversation with the superintendents today, and we agreed that the reports would go to the leadership level of superintendents and the directors of special education. Because of what Ben kind of shared in the beginning, you would have to understand, what the graphs are showing, so that if a board member is interested, the superintendents would do it in collaboration with you and walk through the reports, is what the request would be.
I guess I'd ask a question of this group, given we're representing this side of the equation, even though we also represent the other side of the equation. When I hear for the first time that superintendents are, expecting certain type of information, they want to see academic progress, things that's their drive, right? That they have. Not that that's inconsistent with what the drive is here. But I could imagine sometimes where they're not always aligned as to what expectations and realities of what actually is going on. And so there's a translation element that is important to come into play. So where I'm going with my question is, has there been in the past with 287, or would we consider moving forward? How do we help with translation, which goes a little bit to your question, that as we better understand what this is, and you're having your leadership discussions at the superintendent and the special services level, where can we play a role to help with that? Because I can see with any data, people can cherry pick what they want, the better part of the story, the worst part of the story, whatever narratives they want to have. And the best thing is to ensure that you don't let people just create narratives on their own. You need to translate what the thing is there. So my real question is I don't need an answer, but more of, as you're thinking about in your strategic process and now you're looking at this, I'd like to at least be considered for what can I do in Edina to help make sure that we're translating correctly, not only for Dr. Stanley, but for the rest of the team, and that they're taking away the right things.
Mm.
Not that their goal is to not, but they're not focusing immediately on this. They're focusing on all the other things that they've got. That's what I would want to ensure collaboration. So again, it's more of an open-ended question, but that's what I'm hearing when I hear you say what you just said about your conversation today. I don't want to create negatives, but I want to make sure that we're able to bridge that.
If I can, I'd like to respond.
Please.
One thing that I think about with this board is that looking at the goals and the data for District 287. You know, we won't go down to the student level at a governance level, but we will come back to you on a regular basis regarding the overall data of District 287 and how our students are doing in these areas. Then when we go to the deeper dive, we work with the special education directors and leaders in talking about how students are, you know, how they enter into District 287, what's that screener, where are they at? And then we talk about what is our responsibility of growth when they're with us. And as they transition back to their home district if able, then what are some strategies that were successful in that growth so that they could do a reintegration? One thing that I appreciate about the superintendents today in our dialogue was really digging into the data, and we were there to help interpret for them.
Okay.
And I really do see that as my role as I work with the superintendents of our member districts and say, what does this mean? So we really got into, and to the point of, can I have the student's name? Because now we're just talking about 30 kids, and what could I do at my district to make them more successful here? And that's exactly the work that we, as superintendents, as directors of special education, leaders in learning, that we come together and do in those groups and talk about it. So I was really pleased by the collaboration and understanding of the member districts. Because you could look at the data and go, oh my goodness, you know, like, is 287 doing their job? You should look at us and ask us that. And we would like to have data to show that we are doing our job. And students, again, we have to wrap around and the needs that are met in order to make academic growth and progress. And so as we put this together, just your role would be continuing to share the wonderful stories as you went around in the bus and you saw the great services. And that was really consistent, is the services that District 287 provides are amazing. How can we show those in results in the growth of the student? And that's what we're working through. And that's what the superintendent's asked. Mhm.
Francesca. So this is a baseline, so in and of itself, it does give a lot of great information. And of course, I know there's a lot of questions I have, so I'm sure the superintendents definitely had a lot of questions because they probably were really looking in.
Mhm.
But it's a baseline, so it's not going to give that full picture. We need to see what happens at the end of this year. And then we need to come back next year and get the midpoint. And I think at that point, and I could be wrong, but I think at that point, then you're gonna really have something, you know? It's not even gonna be, you know, the second, it's gonna be the third report. And then from there, you can be like, all right, here's what we're gonna try to do now. So it's gonna be kind of a while. And I think the superintendents at the home districts, they're like you, they
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
So this is very exciting. What I wonder about, and you probably have some ideas already, is depending how many students come in and how many students go out, and then how many students are going to consistently be on the report by the time we get to the third one, that kind of, are there thoughts about how to, not that I need you to tell me now, but are there thoughts about what could be done to make sure that the information being presented, like to the superintendents, can kind of have, because for it to be really valuable, you would want to have that longer period, those 3 reports with consistent students. You want everybody in all of them, but is there something, because that would really help them kind of
Yeah.
see what things are like.
Yeah, you all experienced, and have talked about the turnover in care and treatment. So as we do screeners and monitor progress, you know that the student that was there in attendance and report 1 may not be the same student there. So we do have to talk about when they're with us, the duration of our time, and the growth that occurs while they're with District 287. And that's continued conversations of what that would look like.
And then in terms of like looking at it and being concerned where things are, part of what we are seeing if we're looking at, FastBridge results are students who've had issues that impacted their learning, and that's why they came here, because their learning was so impacted.
Mhm.
I think home district superintendents know that also. So, they would then, I think, have to look at how the student was when they sent them here. And then that would make what their FastBridge were make more sense, because there may be growth. And coming out of 2 years of COVID, there are home districts that have seen students plateau or make some dips.
Mhm.
So, and they know that about their students.
Yeah, absolutely.
Heidi, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, Shannon, I didn't see you. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay.
So to that end, I'm wondering, when you're drilling down this information with each individual superintendent, are you able to identify students for them by name? Like,
We could do that.
If-
We did not do that this morning, but we could do that. We could get down to the individual student because we can do so within the dashboard. It's not accessible in the report, but we
Right.
certainly could do that with.
okay, I'm just curious. Thank you.
I would anticipate some of the superintendents having some of their other leaders connect with our leaders and do the drill down. It could be with the special education or, but yeah, some superintendents ask for a drill down.
I was wondering, around at Hopkins, we have been speaking a lot about different metrics for measuring student success and have accumulated a suite of data points in which we are using to assess holistically how our students are growing and changing and learning in Hopkins. And I was wondering, when we talk about academics, I think we're all aware that the ways in which we assess that can be very limited, narrow, and not necessarily capture where a student is. And so I'm wondering what kind of assessment tools are used? Because I know as a parent, that is one of the many ways in which you feel that your child is growing and performing. So how do you assess that here in 287?
Good question. I'll answer it a couple of ways. One is I would say that we really are just within the last couple of years, and we went back even less than 3 years ago, this district was not taking period attendance in all of our classes. So when we go back in a very short history and look at the kinds of data input practices that we had at the sites to where we are now, we've really come quite a long way where that's happening consistently across all of our sites. We got a way to visualize it and talk about it with data teams to look at it. So one of my responses is that we're still really trying to get good at what we have right now and make sure that the assessments that we have are implemented, that they're used, they're done so with fidelity, and that we're getting good data out that we can use and respond to make sure we're making good data informed decisions for our students. That's not to say that we're not trying to always look for how we're going to make sure that we're assessing all of our students accurately in all the ways that we need to. For example, this year we looked at the SABRS. It's a mental health screener, and making that part of the work that we're doing for all of our students. So we would screen all of our students with a SABRS metric to give us that universal screener on mental health. We didn't adopt that yet. It's still kind of in the works in terms of what we're looking at. But we're always looking for ways that we can assess our students, both on the academic side and the mental health side, better than what we are. I'd add maybe just one more part, and I referenced this earlier, but I'll be a little bit more specific. In the case of one of our schools at Ann Bremmer Education Center, the academic screeners that we currently have, the two that I referenced, FastBridge and MAP, that's only really appropriate for about half of the students that are at Ann Bremmer. And so when I just showed you that data and we're looking at the students at Ann Bremmer, about 50% of them are not being captured in that academic screener. So your points is good that on one hand, we're really building our infrastructure, a solid basis for all of the work that we're doing. and we're investigating additional screeners that we think are appropriate. And we recognize that we need to continue to do better in that area because we have some students who are not collecting the data on yet in this kind of way. It's a great question, something that we're working on and that we'll continue to work on as we go forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think that when you are working with students who present in many different ways, the concept of academics and standardized testing becomes, there's just so many layers that interrupt a student's ability to show who they are and what they know. So I appreciate that that's on the radar, and while also recognizing, knowing where the growth is happening is essential. And I'm sorry, I had just one more question. I saw the data points around restricted procedures, and I was just wondering if you could go over what those look like in 287.
Well, those are physical restraints, and they include any type of physical restraint. So it could be the way that you're thinking of it now. It could also be a transport where we're helping to move a student from one place to another. But any type of restrictive procedure or physical restraint is what's captured in that number.
Is seclusion involved as well?
We
or-
do seclusion in our district.
Go ahead, Tim.
So this data dashboard is great. I do like the analytical part of me. I love it. I'm a numbers guy, and it tells a lot. And we're able to graph and see where students are doing well, where they're not, and by district and by different departments that we have in our district and different learning centers. But there's a big part of me too that sees a lot of tangible value in like what we heard tonight, the sharing of the success. We've heard it multiple times in my 3 years of being on this board, and we can't lose sight of that because these again are just numbers, and these stories do humanize and really tell a story of what we do as a district and to these children and the differences we're making in their lives and the paths that they can lead forward to better themselves and create a future for themselves. Excuse me. We had the same conversation this week in Robbinsdale. Not talking about data dashboard, but just talking like our test scores. Ours are horrible. Just after the pandemic and everything else, our students deal with a lot of our students here deal with a whole lot more that we're all aware of. And it can't be quantified. They're not good test takers. I mentioned before that, the MCAs are biased. They really are. And they are very outdated and need to be updated severely. Because, they always tell this story and the same districts keep on getting the highest scores and the rest of us get the lowest scores. And they're the most diverse districts. So I think that's pretty racist of a test, if you ask me, straight up. So I don't want to put so much emphasis on that and everything else, but tell our stories because they do hold a lot of value to them. I mean, again, I like the data and it's great to go off of, but we can't lose sight of what we're doing in that focus. That's all I'm doing.
So, I mean, I couldn't agree more because I think how we present this data, our staff members who come into our buildings and into our district office every day and work with our students, our ESPs, teachers, social workers, everybody else, they're doing awesome work. And I wouldn't want the data to be presented in a way that tells anything different. They are doing awesome work and lots of people are doing really good work with students who really need them. And yes, we have work to do in the data. Yes, it's alarming. But yes, our staff are doing a really good job. And so I do think it's an excellent point in that we want to be really mindful of that and how we go about talking about the data, presenting it. It's definitely not to deflate people. It's for us to use it as a baseline for how we can go forward.
Jackie, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just, piggybacking off what a few of us have said. We know we have to have data and we have to have some standardized tests. There's federal requirements that we have to take care of. And I keep encouraging us all to remember what is it that we're actually trying to measure and what do we want to measure. I'm as a teacher, I'm frustrated with the amount of assessment that assesses things that you can look up on the internet, which is, I mean, in my personal opinion,
not what we want our students to have? And how can we find assessments that assess critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, those kinds of, engineering problem solving skills, things that actually will make a difference in any, whatever career and life path you choose to make, whether or not you could, do geometry in 12th grade when you took it in 9th grade doesn't make any sense to me. So, and I know we have constraints because we have to do these, of all the ones that I know of so far, MAP and FastBridge are some of the better ones. But yeah, just to keep in mind, to keep coming back to that, even though we have our constraints.
Francesca, is there something else you wanted to add?
I had a question piggybacking on the point that Director Andreessen brought up with some of the standardized testing not necessarily being the best fit for everybody. And then you were saying that only about half of the students in one site can take it. And I was wondering, are the IEPs, they don't just set goals, but they then record if goals have been achieved. Is there usable data in that can be used in addition to the standardized testing for students that can take it, and in lieu of the standardized testing for students for whom that wouldn't be appropriate for them to take?
Sure, the IEP's goals and objectives are a critical part of the education for our students in special education. And for sure, we should be looking at that and using that data in every bit that we are using the rest of the data. It's actually something that we hope is a long-term goal. And some people think that maybe it's going to be a real challenge to get there. What we really would want to do is to take our ed plan data where all of our IEP's goals and objectives sit right now and move them into our dashboard, and so that we can look at it side by side with the rest of this data. I said it the way that I did because it's a lot of work. Maybe a little bit overly optimistic, but I do think that we're going to need to be able to triangulate the data in that kind of way. And we have 470 students in federal setting for special education in our district. And we should be looking and tracking and monitoring how well they're meeting their goals and objectives, and using that as part of the conversation for our work with all of this data.
Well, if you think about it, the reason why the student is probably 7 is because the home district was very poor at being able to do that.
Could follow up. So I think it's a very big goal, and I hope it can be achieved. I don't know if every single thing from every IEP will be able to go into there, just sometimes they can be, students I had once upon a time, they were very, very specific, and it might not make a lot of sense outside of that one individual student. But at least now, if a superintendent or a director of special education from district wanted to, they could dive into those IEPs to really get some good data on their specific students.
Okay. I want to echo so many of the wonderful comments that have been shared. And I think, Sam, what you said is especially hitting me. I think I'm so grateful that I got to be at North Education Center this week. And I'm thinking about the kids who we got to hear from and who took us on tours of their programs. And like, they are beautifully unique humans who do not show up in these dashboards. And so how do we honor that, right? And I think having this is such a massive step forward as far as just information, as far as baseline. And I think now the power is in what do we do with it and how do we talk about it? And I just think, as you mentioned, how do we think about this as part of the strategic planning process that we're undergoing as well? And it excites me to think about how do we talk about academic success in the context of our districts? Like, we have the opportunity to have those conversations right now in a way that feel really intentional and purposeful and rooted in our kids and in their humanity and in all of the gifts that they bring. So that excites me. So thank you for all of this. We are going to move to the Business Services and Labor Relations Report, which this evening contains the unaudited financial report for FY22 that we will be asked to approve this evening. Like Gloria, our Director of Finance, is making her way up to the microphone. Hello, Gloria. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Are you able? Here, oh, put it in the presentation mode. All right, great. All right, thank you, Chair Brackey and board members for having us here tonight. Myself, along with May Hawkins, will be presenting our FY 21-22 unaudited financial report tonight. So tonight we want to review our financial position for FY 21-22 fiscal year. And that is going to include our unassigned general fund areas, our interfund transfers, our general fund assigned fund balances, our general fund restricted areas, an overall budget to actual for Fund 1. We're going to go over the COVID-19 grants and related funding, non-major funds and transfers, a general all funds recap, and then a little bit about our audit results. So in your packet, you have the full worksheet that I have presented here. And if you're able to pull it up on your devices, it might be beneficial because the numbers don't transfer well on the presentation. They get a little small to read. But this is the worksheet in your packet. And just to kind of go over the how the data is presented here, the first column next to the budget or the programs is our beginning fund balance. So that's where we started the year in our fund balance. The yellow section is our FY 22 revenues, and it's in 3 areas. The first column is our revised budget revenue that was brought to you back in February. And the second is what our actual revenue ended at the FY 22 fiscal year. And then the last column is the comparison to the budget to actual, the variances there. And then we have the same format for the expenditures in the blue there. And then we go to the fund balance column. So the first one in kind of that orangish headed column is the fund balances we projected with the revised budget. So taking that first fund balance and adding the revenues and subtracting the expenditures, we get what we projected in revised budget. And then we have the actuals before transfers. And then we have the fund balance change. And then in the green column, we'll go over in other slides later on those proposed transfers that will get us to that ending fund balance in the last column. So the first section of your worksheet is our general fund unassigned. And in this district, we divide our general fund unassigned area up into 4 program areas. The first is our admin and operations. Secondly, we have on there the ALC and academic education programs, and then career tech education, and then special ed programs. And then underneath each of those categories, we have the grants factored out because we started that, I believe, last year because we wanted to show the data without the grants because the grants can fluctuate quite a bit from year to year. So I'm going to start with the district admin and operations. As you can see there, we came in a little bit under in our revenue and expenditures, and the expenditures were mainly in our non-staff areas. Our ALC and academic education, you can see the revenue ended up over projected budget. And that was mainly because of the growth we've seen this year with the NSO program over last year, Northern Star Funding Program. And then the expenditures came in a little bit lower, and that was actually in the ALC programs. career and technical education, that's our pathway programs at HTC. The revenues and expenditures really came in very close to what we were anticipating, and then their fund balance did go up. And then lastly, we have our special ed programs came in very close to budget, considering the large budget that our special ed programs are. But the expenditures did come in a little below, and that was really kind of through cost containment as well as some harder to fill positions that did get filled. Okay, so in the green column in your worksheet, we have those proposed transfers. So I wanted to break those down so you knew what was in each of those transfers. So you can see the different program, those 4 program areas. We have the district admin and operations. We have a positive transfer of 113,467. ALC academic area 3,558. And then we have 223,319 going out of the special ed area. The first transfer we have is on the top there is transfer to other funds. And you'll see that there's the 63,440 going into ALC academic education area. And then it's coming out of the special ed area. And that was needed to balance that area. So the next 2 are related to subsequent year budgets. So there is an accounting standard that requires us, if we budget in the next fiscal year, our expenditures to exceed our revenues in any given area, then the auditors require us to kind of set those funds aside so they know that we have the funds to complete that budget. So the first year is for the first row, I guess, after transfers is subsequent year budget 22-23. And that you can see going out of admin and operations, ALC academic education. That's because when we brought the fiscal year 22-23 original budget, we had the expenditures exceeding the revenues in those areas. But then you can see the next row is prior year. So that we budgeted in FY 21-22, we set aside that fund balance. So that goes back into the unassigned area as a positive adjustment. And then we have the non-expendables, and that kind of works the same way. Our non-expendables are our prepaid expense. So in a fiscal year, we will have expenses in this case, FY 21-22, that we had to pay in advance of for 22-23. This is why I never know what year I'm in, because we're always operating like 3 years. But so when we do that, we prepay it, we set it aside in fund balance, and then the expenditure is recognized in the following year. So that goes into a separate fund balance. And you can see the expenditures for 22-23 are negative coming out, but then the prior year is positive going in to relieve those expenditures that were recognized in 21-22. And then we have, after that, we have the property account, and that was a transfer from the general district-wide admin and operations to an assigned area that we'll get to next. But that was basically some projects that couldn't be completed in time at the end of the fiscal year. We wanted to reserve that budget for the following year to complete those projects. And then we have strategic priorities, and you can see that is coming out of the special ed fund balance area, and that is going into another assigned area, which gets me to my next slide, which is the general fund assigned fund balances. So these are areas the district has decided to monitor and track separately so that those balances at the year end will carry forward and be able to use for those specific purposes. A couple of highlights on this section. We had the COVID-19 additional expenses. We set up that area of assigned fund balance when the pandemic started, and it was to relieve expenditures we knew we had that would not be covered by federal grants. We spent a little bit of that in FY20. 21, and then FY22, we spent 146,000. And then the fund balance there, 310,000 will be used in 22, 23. And if anything is left over, 23, 24. And then we're hoping we won't have to reserve anymore for pandemic related expenses after that. Strategic priorities, we set aside funds in that area to prioritize our strategic priorities, and they are in the areas of mental health, family engagement, and equity and inclusion. And then lastly, we had the tuition adjustment reserve. We did not take anything out of this assigned fund balance in FY22. But we did take 888,000 out in FY21 due to the pandemic and the change in our enrollment. So it is a reserve to that we have put aside so we can react to sudden changes in tuition-based programs. So then going to the transfers for our assign account, again, the property count was in that assigned area. So that had a positive 52,988 coming into it. That came from the unassigned area of district admin and operations. And then we had the subsequent year budgets that when we went over the unassigned area, the current year and prior year, the difference between those two, we didn't need as much in the assigned area. So that is actually a negative adjustment there. And that's actually a good thing that we didn't need as much there. But it shows on our assigned areas a negative adjustment. And then the strategic priorities, again, moving that $137,072 into that fund balance. So the last area of general fund restricted is general fund restricted. And these are, it's the third section if you're following along on your worksheet. And these are the areas that are restricted by state statute. So we are required to track, revenues and expenditures separately, keep the fund balance. And if there's fund balance, it rolls over to the next year for the specific purpose that was intended by that statute. So a couple things to highlight on this screen. Medical assistance revenue came in higher than expected, and the expenditures came in right on, pretty close to budget there. So our fund balance did grow in the medical assistance area to 1.5 million in the fund balance there. So that was a shift between going from all the distance learning in FY21 to more in-person classes in FY22. And then we have the school, Safe Schools budget is also in this restricted area. And we did have a planned decrease of their fund balance, and that was used to purchase radios for 2 of our sites. And then lastly, I was going to highlight compensatory, or that's the basic skills revenue. And this area, the expenditures did come in slightly higher than budget. So that fund balance did decrease. And I think they, yep, they ended at 115,000 left in fund balance. So that wraps up the general fund. So to summarize, the general fund in total, all three areas, our revenues really came in very close to budget, less than a percentage or a 0.10% of a percentage below budget, and our expenditures came in about 2% lower than budget. So then that is the last slide for me. I'm going to turn it over to May, who is going to talk about our COVID-19 expenditures.
Thank you, Gloria. Good evening, Chair Brockie and board members. So now we're going to do, I'm going to call it a brief overview, but as you can see, it's a very busy slide. But I'm going to try and go over it as briefly as I can. So there are 17 federal grants listed on this page, each with their own restrictions. And plus we used, as Gloria talked about, $146,900 of our COVID-19 fund balance. So the 18 funding sources. This table provides the name of each funding source, the amount that was spent in 21-22, and then a brief description of what that was spent on. Okay, so I'm going to do this in blocks. So the first block is the ESSER 2 funding for the regular school year. There are 3 grants in there totaling $319,891 spent. And you can see that was for COVID tracking, sanitization, cleaning sort of things we did, and then our professional development and our ALC instructional staff. The next block is FEMA, and through an arduous process very arduous process of requesting, having items marked as ineligible for funding, and then months later being told, no, those items are eligible for funding, please resubmit. The district was able to finally get reimbursed $44,536 for PPE and sanitization supplies. The third block is food services, and thanks to a 1-year provision, all students received 3 meals last year, and also additional funding was provided to offset the higher costs of food supply chain. So that totaled $409,088 for that block. The fourth block, keep in order here, is the funds that were restricted for summer school only. So these funds were used to pay for summer recovery programs that were offered in July 2021 and June 2022, because those are the summer months within the 21-22 fiscal year. That was a total of $478,568 from 5 different grants. The fifth block is IT funding that was allocated in a process similar to E-rate. It was called emergency connectivity funding. And it was restricted for the purchase of Chromebooks and instructional technology. The next block was restricted to COVID testing and vaccinations. And there was a total of 2 grants there for $60,315. And then the next 2 blocks relate to meeting family needs, with $3,156 for the homeless children and youth reimbursement and $1,270 for staff-related time for the PEBT cards that were administered to families. And lastly, the district spent $146,900, or approximately 30% of our COVID-19 assigned fund balance, and that was mainly for staff for school year recovery services for students. So all totaled, the district spent $1,664,211 on COVID-19 related expenditures in 2021. That is in addition to the $921,625 that was spent in 2021, and the $313,933 that was spent in 1920, for a total as of June 30th, 2022 of $2.9 million. Now, as we move down the unaudited spreadsheet, we come to the section for non-major funds. These are legally separate funds outside of the general fund. The revenues for these funds came in 5.3% higher than budget, and the expenditures came in 1.35% higher than budget. Included in these non-major funds is food service, federal funding through the Seamless Summer Program. Sorry, I lost my place. And the internal service funds, which are the district self-insurance funds for health and dental. Both revenues and expenditures ended the year higher than budget, representing a $1.1 million increase in these combined fund balances. In our food service fund, as we talked about before, we received federal funding to pay for student meals. That federal funding offset more revenues than we had budgeted. So at the November 10th school board meeting, the board approved a transfer from the district-wide administration and operations portion of the general fund to the food services fund of $256,156. Due to the continually changing nature of the 21-22 school year, the revised budget revenue for food service was calculated using a very conservative approach based on changing formulas that we received from the federal government as to the amount of revenue that we were going to receive for student meals. So due to both reductions in cost and the higher federal funding, this transfer is $228,107 under budget and $122,721 less than last year. As this transfer was lower than budgeted, this had a one-time only positive impact on the district-wide administration and operations fund, so that area ended the year with a small fund balance. Sorry. I bumped the mic. So the revised budget that was approved last February included utilizing $2.983 million in general fund balances. I'm happy to report that thanks to the dedication of all district leaders, expenditures were reduced to the extent possible, and we ended the year only using $1.25 million in general fund balances. The general fund unassigned fund balances decreased by $118,468 after transfers, and the general fund assigned fund balances decreased by $1.2 million. This is the second year in a row that the district has used over $1.2 million of assigned fund balances. The general fund restricted fund balances remain stable. For the funds outside the general fund, a reminder that the debt service fund will continue to grow, and these funds are placed in an interest-bearing sinking fund to pay back the North Education Center Quality School construction bonds of $29,790,000, which will be one principal payment made in 2029. The health insurance reserve increased. The insurance committee took this into consideration when they set the rates that the board approved in October. Those rates were set below the medical trend percent, knowing that the reserve has more than 12 months of claims. The full audit report will be presented on January 26th by our audit partner. New for this 21-22 audit was a new GASB. So GASB is a Governmental Accounting Standards Board regulation. So we had GASB 87, which is a lease standards and compliance. Basically, that required us to do detailed tracking of all lease agreements exceeding 12 months or that could exceed 12 months, regardless of the total cost of the lease. And then new for this upcoming, or the year we're currently in now, we have GASB 96, which is a new standard regarding software licenses or subscription-based information technology arrangements, as they call them. And that process requires us once again to track all software licenses that exceed 12 months or that could be renewed and exceed 12 months. Finance and IT have developed new processes for tracking these and have already provided training to assist staff in documenting these agreements. Some of these have come to the school board for approval. We are pleased to present you with another clean audit report with no audit findings. Yay. I'm gonna pause. So it takes knowledgeable leadership, great procedures and processes, and daily diligence to accomplish this. A huge thanks to our dedicated finance team, and a big thank you to Gloria Wilder, our Director of Finance, for her incredible work on this year's audit.
I like
You like the
swirling
animation? Thank you for your time and attention. Gloria and I have shared a lot of information, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have on the unaudited finance report at this time.
Fantastic. And again, we'll be receiving the official audit at it is our next meeting, even though it feels a long ways away in January 26th. So this evening is just the request to approve the unofficial.
And, you know,
questions or
I don't know that we
Yeah.
explained, and we do have new board members, so we bring this unaudited report to the board at this time because we are required to submit to MDE and other regulatory agencies a financial report by the end of December. Right? And your next board meeting to do a full audit report isn't until January. So this then gives us the authority to make those submissions to those government agencies.
Thank you for that. That's very helpful. Go ahead, Anne.
Good news, the audit report is clean. That's amazing. But also I heard some other good news as we kind of went, and we didn't like clap for those. So I just wanted to, I mean, like I heard about the school lunch balance. I think that was good news. The medical assistance that can bounce back after COVID, the health insurance, the self-insurance fund is really strong. And so that's amazing when you were setting premiums. Was there any other like good news that we should be tracking on that we can?
I'm gonna look at Gloria like, I don't know. I'm trying to think.
That's enough.
I mean, we didn't spend as much fund balance as we thought we were going to,
That
so
is-
that
that
was good
is-
news.
that is
Not
also
that
good
any, not that any executive director of business and services is gonna tell you, stand up here and tell you it's good news that we spent fund balance.
I think we're all of us, we all sit on other boards too, and we know what that's like. So, no, really, this is fantastic, and thank you both. I know this is a ton of work. We'll say this again when we have MMKR here in January, but it's a ton of work, and we really appreciate it. We really appreciate both the how, the clean audit, all of that, but also the why and the actual financial results a lot. It's this has been a really tough time to do these jobs in the last couple of years, and you have done it really super admirably.
And just want to do a shout out to the whole finance team because they work year round and the compliance is constantly changing. So just when we think we have it figured out, we have new compliance to regulate. So it is a year round process that the finance team monitors as things come through.
So please give them our thanks.
I see a hand down towards this direction. Go ahead, Francesca.
I was going to say, thank you very much for putting this together. It is extremely detailed. I looked at it a lot more prior to the meeting and I looked through some of the stuff. And I did notice what Director Casey pointed out, that there were areas where what we spent went down and what came in went up. And those were, celebratory moments. I did notice some of the grants in here, they are on the scale of a school budget, very, very small. And I can imagine that each one of them is quite a bit of work. So very much appreciation to all of those busy fingers and hands that were behind doing that. Even the ones that are small, they do add up and it really did help to make a big difference. And I know there were also some cuts, but budget reductions that we've done. And so I think that was also very hard work and not ever easy. So really appreciate all of it. There was a little thing in here. Where is it? The Hennepin County vaccination thing that happened here. Few of my kids and I completed our COVID vaccines at that, so it's very cool now to see it here.
Other questions or comments? Go ahead, Ruthie.
Just want to say thank you for all the hard work, and it feels so good when we go back to, at least in my home district, and you say a clean audit. And this twice now. I'll be taking the success again to them about the clean audit. So everyone was very happy to hear about that.
Cannot emphasize that enough, especially given the complexity of special education funding. I mean, it's profound. And so, and as you said, it's constantly changing. So our deepest thanks. Any other final comments or questions before we entertain a motion to approve the unaudited financial report? Oh, I'm sorry, we do have a hand in the back. Go ahead, Anne.
I just wanted to give a shout out to the HR team as well. A lot of the information that the auditors request comes out of the HR information system. And some of the requests come at the last minute and they're involved. And I just want to shout out to my team for their contributions as well.
Absolutely. Thank
Very
you.
good.
Thank you to the HR team, to the finance team, to everybody who is here in person tonight. And we will do more to appreciate folks once we have the official audit report at our next meeting as well.
Thank you.
So do we have a motion to approve the unaudited financial report? Okay, we have a motion by Michael Bergman, a second by Francesca Pagan Umar. Any final discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the unaudited financial report for 2021, 2022 is approved. Congratulations and thank you so much. We move now into board business. The first item here is board chair report, and I actually have a couple things that I will share. First, the item that is listed here is the officer election process. And at the end of our last meeting, I mentioned to let me know if you'd be interested in serving on the nominating committee. I forgot about it. I suspect everybody else forgot about it because I didn't hear from anybody. So I am hoping that we can just pause and actually, I'm speaking for myself here. Think about the purpose of the nominating committee and how it works. I will be very honest on the mic and say it has always made me sort of like pause and wonder, because my experience is the nominating committee ends up being the group of people that then nominates themselves, which feels a little bit awkward. And is different than how I am used to doing. So I would like to just think and talk, and maybe we can do this at our next meeting about how we want to do that moving forward. And I am open to ideas that people have, how folks do it in their home districts, to just have conversation about who the officers are going to be for the next year. And again, I own the fact that like I'd forgotten about this until I got the agenda a couple of days ago, and I thought, oh yeah, we need to figure that out. Go ahead, Francesca.
Can only the nominating committee then nominate people, or can people also?
No, people can always nominate in the meeting,
Okay.
but the way that it has historically worked in this district is there is a nominating committee who takes interest from the full board. Again, I'm speaking from my own personal experience. There has always really been one person for each slot. The nominating committee then brings to the board meeting, here are the people that have expressed interest. And so it becomes sort of like a de facto, like this group of people say, here are the people who are interested, and then there aren't other people who raise their hands in the moment. Go ahead, Michael.
That process sounds more appropriate for what I heard on the Get on the Bus on Tuesday, when there were 2 representatives of every member district and there was like 20 some odd people, whatever it is.
Maybe it's a descendant of that time.
I guess I would throw out there without a motion, but just a discussion item. Why would one do that? It seems like a complete waste of time. You know, I think that you could just have a straight up in the nominating process, which I don't know what it is like in everybody else. Just there is discussion. There's no question. There's discussion about not just the officer positions, but about the committee structure, and the chair typically kind of goes and talks and guides, okay, what are you interested in? So on and so forth, and trying to figure out what they want to do. And then when it comes to the nominating process, while it can change, typically it's already been kind of pre-discussed from that standpoint. But the idea that there's a nominating committee for this number of people seems kind of ridiculous. So I've said that online. So, but I'm just assuming it's because of the way in which this structured size-wise years ago.
Yeah, I appreciate you making that connection, because I don't think I would have necessarily thought of that. So if it sounds like it's okay with people that maybe we just take a little time, I'll do some more conversations with staff about like the history of it and making sure there aren't pieces that are being missed, and figuring out what options we might have, just to make sure that we have something in place for January that feels a little bit more open and democratic.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but like, it's just officer positions are chair, vice chair, and is
Clerk
there
and
technically,
treasurer.
there is a
Board.
treasurer and a second, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Francesca and then Sam.
What if, I don't know what else people can do, but looking at the size of our board and how it functions, could people just like email through to the current chair? If they have an interest.
Absolutely.
And as well as arrive, and then that way perhaps part of our agenda before the meeting could be who's expressed interest in what roles.
Yep.
And then it gives all of us an opportunity to think about those people. If there happen to be more than one person, we can then show up at the meeting, and then anybody else who wants to throw their hat in then could, and then if there's more than one, we can have them share each why.
Yes.
And then vote.
Yes, I think that's what you described is what has happened in the past. It's just gone to a nominating committee and then the nominating committee. So it's just whether or not we need that intermediary step and group of people. Go ahead, Sam.
Do we have another meeting in December?
We do not.
Okay. So then my thought is, why not have this good discussion here now?
Um,
Seriously, I mean,
yeah.
'cause that's like what Michael said, that's what we do at Robbinsdale.
Yeah.
Our first meeting of the month, it has the.
Oh, yeah, because isn't the first meeting in January
The
the
first,
organizing?
no, the first meeting of the month is our work session, and then we discuss committee assignments
Yep.
and board roles.
Yep.
And then people, put in their name in the ring about chair, vice chair.
Yep.
Treasurer, secretary, and then, yeah, obviously, there's gonna be multiple interests, whatever, then both candidates can talk amongst all the board members. And then actually, when you have the organizing meeting in January, then, names come about, and then that's where discussion or vote happens.
Yeah.
So.
We could do that. The other thing that I will admit I was thinking about as part of this is, and this is slightly more unique to this district, is we don't even know who our board is going to be yet because of the changing terms across multiple districts. Is it 5 or 6? And so I think that's another factor that I think I try to be mindful of, is that the group of us that are here tonight are not necessarily going to be the same board members that are going to be here in January. So I just think that adds some complexity to it as well. Go ahead.
I was also going to say, don't know if necessarily, and I'm not going to speak in favor of a nominating committee. However, I can see that this board is different than our home district boards in that there's generally less of a history and knowledge of each other. And so I can see how a nominating committee could make sense given, and it makes it more formal instead of, walking out the boardroom being like, hey, you want to be chair?
Sure. Yeah.
It's that kind of thing that I think makes this a little bit more distinct. Not saying we can't have a work session. That's how we do it in Hopkins. I just think there are things that make this different than our home district.
One other bit of historical context, especially for folks who are sort of here for the first time for this part of it, is typically our board officers have served in 2-year cycles. And myself as chair, well, you're even more recent. You're on like month 4 as vice chair. Shannon as clerk and Ruthie as treasurer are all in our first year. So I think there's also just a question if folks are interested or willing to continue serving for a second year. I don't know if people want time to think about that, but that could also be part of just the conversation that we have right now, as other folks also think about whether they would be interested in roles.
That's actually something I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I remember when you became chair, and so my thoughts were for the purpose of stability of
Yeah.
the board, and not just for us, but also I think for the superintendent, because she has to get to know new people. I personally, and this is just my opinion, am
Yeah.
very strongly in favor of giving Superintendent Dowd as much stability as possible. And I think that with what's coming up with shifting positions, what has happened just before she came as our superintendent and what will be happening in the next year, if people are comfortable, I think that would be ideal to keep people who've only been there for a year or a few months in place so that they can continue advancing their learning and superintendent continue building a relationship with them.
I appreciate that too. And I will share openly, I am willing to continue as chair for another year. So I don't know if other people just want some time to think. I do commit to having more intentionality before we come back together for our next meeting in January. So I think current officers thinking about whether it's something that you would consider serving for another year. And then again, once we know who our full board is going to be come January, I also want to be mindful of the experience that new folks might have in their very first meeting coming on and be like, you know, like you said, who are these people? And now I'm being asked to make officer decisions. It's a very quick transition.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just speak for myself, which is, my term is up. However, I have not had interest from any other board members in St. Louis Park, and I am asking to be re-upped. And I have only been vice chair for like 4 months, so I would love to continue if the board is willing.
Great. Great. So chair and vice chair are both willing to continue. Clerk, treasurer will let you to think about it and let other folks continue. Willing to continue. Okay.
Sends me back.
Ruthie, I know that you stepped out for a few minutes. We're just talking about the process for determining officer elections for next year. And I had that the four of us are kind of in our first year, and that historically people serve in their seats for 2 years. So I don't know if that's something that you already know off the top of your head that you're willing to continue doing for another year.
I'm willing if no one is interested. I think this is my second year, right?
Oh, is it your second year as treasurer? Okay.
Second year, a part of a year
Okay.
that I came.
Okay.
But I'm willing to continue if, unless someone else. I think it's always good to have just somebody else experience, be a part of the team.
Okay.
So I'm open.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
No, been there, done that. Well, I'm happy to remain as historian. Even if I make some mistakes, like, what was that?
That is, Michelle is our unofficial historian for 27. I love that. The other things I wanted to share at this point, so as we've said, our next meeting is not until January 26th, and that is because we do historically cancel the first meeting because it conflicts with the MSBA conference that is taking place at the same time. To that end, if you would like to attend the MSBA Annual Leadership Conference on behalf of Intermediate District 287, please let Juanine know so that she can RSVP on your behalf so that you can attend as a representative of our district. And then for that January 26th meeting, we're talking about how, yes, we still are not 100% sure who is going to be on the board representing member districts, but I hope that everybody here will come to that meeting because we start with recognition and appreciation for board transitions that may be taking place. So please be here so that we can recognize you. So keep January 26th on all of our calendars regardless. All right. The AMSD report, the one thing that I just wanted to do was extend an invitation for people. Oh,
Interrupt,
ahead.
but do we need to take action on the officer election process?
We do
or-
not.
Okay.
No. Wanted to extend an invitation to the annual legislative preview for AMSD, which is on Friday, January 6th. It is at 8 a.m. or it begins at 8 a.m. You can attend virtually.
Little Canada.
You can attend virtually or you can attend in person in Little Canada. If you do want to attend in person, it is actually very important that you RSVP in advance because they need to make sure that we actually have room for people because there are a large number of legislators that attend this event. There are a number of legislative education committee leaders who are already confirmed. The governor has been invited. Once we know who the education commissioner is going to be, they will be invited as well. So wanted to make sure that you all are there if you are so interested. And I will actually be one of the speakers at the event, and specifically we'll be talking about the AMSD priority around student safety and wellness. And so plan to talk a lot about our district here at 287 in that time. And so we'll appreciate having you there for support. Moving down to some of the calendar items, the next Get on the Bus is scheduled for February 7th. And it will be with West Education Center and Hennepin Tech. So hopefully people can join us. We had a really great group on Tuesday. We actually had a quorum of the board, so I had to be very clear that we were not
the weather.
we were not talking about any board business in that gathering. And then our next local 2209 board breakfast is next week, actually December 13th at 7 a.m. If you or anybody from your district plans to attend, especially Get on the Bus, please let Juanine know so that she knows who to plan for. December 13th. That is we do 4 breakfasts a year with local 2209. So it is the second one of those this year. Okay, I think that is it. Thank you for indulging me a long time and a lot of words. We are now going to move into closed session. We may close session to consider strategy for labor negotiations pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.03. Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Francesca Pagan Umar and a second by Sam Sant.
Oh, the motion was by Michelle.
It was.
I did not get my voice out.
I thought I was like literally looking at you as you said it.
I tried to second.
Thank you for correcting me. We have a motion by Michelle Coons. We have a second by Sam Sant. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye. We move into closed session. I ask if you need to like step up or use the restroom to do so right away so that we can just get started as soon as possible. Thank you.